And the author says, Section 12. The prohibitions upon the person who is in the state of minor ritual impurity, the junub, the sexually impure, we'll say sexually impure, and the menstruating or postpartum bleeding woman, period. Or maybe not a period there, if that's just a title. If this a title, then maybe it should be centered there so it doesn't look like it's a paragraph without a sentence, without a period. So this can be summarized. The prohibitions, they translated it the way it is in the Arabic, but the words could be even briefer. The prohibitions upon the person in a state of minor ritual impurity or major ritual impurity. Ritual means religious. And this major ritual impurity is going to be because of being sexually impure. Junub, that means you had sexual intercourse or an ejaculation, either one of those, doesn't have to be both of those. Or because of menstruation or postpartum bleeding. I have a footnote here. A junub person who had sexual intercourse or emitted mani and has not yet performed the ghusl. Yes. Only thing is, where's pregnant woman fit here? Is pregnant woman considered junub? Not pregnant, a woman who delivered. If she delivered and she didn't bleed after delivery, what does that render her? Junub, sexually impure? I don't know. We'll ask, inshallah. She's going to be called junub if she delivered a baby and didn't bleed after that. It is not permissible for the one whose ablution is nullified, here it doesn't have to be capitalized, to do 4 things. 4 things are not permissible to do. The first prohibition is to perform prayer, whether an obligatory, optional, or funeral prayer. That's clear for you. And funeral prayer, why it's singled out here? Because when prayer is going to either be obligatory or optional. So there's nothing in between. So why say funeral prayer after saying obligatory prayer? That's to signal to the funeral prayer being a communal obligation. Being a communal obligation then means it's not obligatory on any person in particular. Unless the only one who knew of the dead, unless there was only one person who knew of the dead, then it would be a personal obligation. The second prohibition is to circumambulate the Kaaba, to circle the Kaaba. Whether obligatory or optional, something just occurred to me too, just yesterday actually, because I always think about how these Arabic words just got dropped into the middle of the sentence like this, and then the English word got put in parentheses instead of the Arabic word, because I think that in Arabic texts, when they put English word in there, they just drop it into the sentence. It looks normal to somebody. If he's used to seeing Arabic and then he sees English word dropped in the middle of the sentence, maybe that's why one would do an English text and drop an Arabic word in the middle of the sentence like that. It seems fine. So the second prohibition is to circumambulate, to circle the Kaaba, whether obligatory or optional. Because this tawaf, circumambulation, or circling the Kaaba, the tawaf, there's an obligatory tawaf and there's optional tawaf. What's obligatory tawaf? There's the tawaf that's the integral of Hajj, and the tawaf that's the integral of Umrah. Umrah is obligatory according to Ash-Shafi'i. And there's the farewell tawaf, the tawaf of leaving Mecca, whether you're a pilgrim or not, according to a saying, that's obligatory. Don't leave Mecca without making tawaf, according to a saying, that's obligatory. And then you have optional tawaf. The third and fourth prohibitions are to carry or touch the book of God. The same judgment applies to what has some of the Quran written on it for the purpose of reading. Not what has Quran written in it for protection. Yani for the purpose of reading here, maybe a better word is for the purpose of reciting. Because sometimes these words, yani the Arabic word is qira'ah probably. In the Arabic text, if we look, probably says for qira'ah. And then qira'ah sometimes going to recite, many times going to translate it as reading. But reading can mean, in English, just looking at the words without saying anything. That's called reading silently. So probably a better word here is for the purpose of reciting. Meaning, some Quran is written in a book that's not a Quran book. It's not a mushaf. But the Quran that's written in that book that's not a mushaf is arranged to facilitate qira'ah. Yani tilawa, which is to recite one ayah after the next, one ayah after the next. So according to that, those translated books, yani they have translation on one side, they have Quran on the other side, and the Quran is not merged with the explanation. Rather, the Quran is lined up by itself, one ayah after the next, on one side of the page. This facilitates tilawa, qira'ah. Then you can't carry that without wudu. As opposed to a tafsir where the explanation and the Quranic text itself are merged into one text for explanation purposes. I think you're familiar with that. To give you a piece of an ayah and then explain, and then another piece of the ayah and then explain. Touching the Quran means touching its papers and its cover that's bound to it, and its margins, yani the space around the edges of the page that don't have anything written in them. You can't touch that either if you don't have wudu, or if you don't have, if you're not clear of religious impurity. And just for your information, you could write in there, it's not haram. You could write in there. And then someone might say, how could you do that? Don't you, if you open your mushaf, don't you see all kinds of stuff in there that's not Quran? You do. Don't you see the name of the surah? And don't you see like the name of the juz' written somewhere in the margin here? And don't you see the page number down on the bottom somewhere? So what's that? That's someone writing in the Quran. So it's not haram. And don't you see sometimes they have the mushaf page? Yeah, and it's the Quran regular, but all the margin is full of tafsir, explanation. So that's writing in the mushaf. So that's not haram. Question: if someone has the digital copy of the Quran on their phones, does this fall under this rule? Well, we learned that it does not fall under that rule. That's what we heard. I heard two saints from two of our sheikhs. So one of them said yes, and I don't think either of them is talking from ignorance. So I don't know how they came to two different answers. So I'll just tell you both of them that reached me, that I heard with my own ears. One of them said, yeah, it does apply. Just like, for example, if you have a tablet, I mean, not an electronic tablet, a board, you have Quran written on it. Or a page, you have Quran written on it. A stone, you have Quran written on it. It's all the same judgment. So I did hear that. So I don't know if that was retracted since, but it reached me. That has the same judgment. So if that Quran appears on your screen like that, like a mushaf page, then it has the same judgment. And I heard that no, does not have the same judgment, because that image that you see on your screen, it's a type of illusion, which it is a type of illusion. That's true. It's a type of illusion. Yani, to make that more understandable to you, that it's type of an illusion. Yani, like, what if there was Quran in the reflection of glass? You looked in, or a mirror. Look, not backwards though, just for argument's sake. Not backwards, it's not reversed. Actually, you looked in the glass or mirror and you saw some Quran there in that reflection. That means now you can't touch the glass, you can't touch the mirror. No, you can. You could touch that glass or that mirror. So it's type of khayal. It's a type of illusion, which that's true. All these things we see on these screens, if you didn't know, it's a type of illusion. That's how they show you, yani, so-called dinosaurs and King Kong and all that stuff. It's all illusion. Amin Wafiq. So that was Shaykh Nabil that said, it's khayal, it's illusion. Doesn't have the same judgment. And the other one was Shaykh Samir. That was what I heard from Shaykh Samir a long time ago. I don't know if he retracted since. So if any of you are hearing this from me and you want to ask him, ask him. Sometimes person might give an answer based on a rule. Sometimes person might give an answer based on a rule. A lot of times. So you can ask him, inshallah. So it says here, however, the mumayyiz child, yani the child who has mental discerning. I'm not sure why sometimes it translates something, sometimes it don't. Whether male or female, who does not have ablution, no need to capitalize here, is permitted to carry and touch the book of God for the purpose of studying. Yani, so if a child reached the age of mental discerning and wants to study the Quran, it is permissible to allow this child to study in the Quran without having to perform wudu. Not for any other purpose such as carrying it from one person to another. Like you don't say to that child, give me the mushaf, and that child doesn't have wudu. It is unlawful for the one who is junub, sexually impure. So, yeah, I would suggest translating these words makes it easier for the learner. Doesn't have to go back and look and check here. And also here, if this is, look what's done here. There's a footnote. So you're introduced here to a word. Let's say it's a foreign word, which yani, you can say, this is a foreign word here, junub. So you're introduced to this word and then it gives you a footnote to explain to you. What is that? A junub person is such and such. Okay. And then after that, then they didn't repeat the footnote over and over, did not repeat the footnote over and over, but decided to repeat the Arabic word over and over. So you could do the reverse of that. You could put the English word there and say sexually impure, and then put a footnote that says junub, and then after that say sexually impure, for example, wherever it falls. Not just that. Same thing, all these appearances of these Arabic words in the middle of the text here. Put the Quran here, and then again and again. You don't have to, like if you just put footnote one time, and then let the person rely on the footnote there, and then just rely on the English after that. That's a suggestion of mine. Yani, I don't mean to be too picky there, but yani. However, the mumayyiz child, whether male or female, we just read that. It is unlawful for the one who is junub to do any of the four aforementioned actions. So what's those four? We said praying, circling the Kaaba, touching the Quran, and carrying it. So the one who's sexually impure can't do any of these. Additionally, it is unlawful for the one who's sexually impure to do two other actions. The first action is to recite the Quran with the tongue in the manner that the recitation is audible to the reciter. He can hear himself, even if no one else can. Even if he can hear himself only from the inside of his own head. You know how if you talk to yourself so low that it's like there's no sound from the outside, but if you plug your ears, you can hear yourself inside your own head, talking with your own tongue. This low, that's haram. If one is sexually impure. Even one letter with the intent to recite the Quran. You said, is it permissible to intentionally listen to the Quran in a state of... No, there's nothing haram with listening. We didn't say listen. We didn't say listen. The second prohibited action is to stay in a mosque or to go back and forth within the mosque, not merely passing through. So the person who's sexually impure, he cannot stay in the masjid, dwell in there, or go back and forth within the mosque. That's the same thing. Staying in there or going back and forth in there, that means staying in there without moving around. Or staying in there, moving around, same judgments. Haram if the person is sexually impure, but not merely passing through. Not merely passing through means not going in one door of the masjid and out the other door of the masjid. It's not even disliked to do that. Not haram, not even disliked. But going in one door of the masjid while sexually impure and coming back out the same door, that has the judgment of dwelling in the masjid. So that's haram. And being able to go in through one door and go out the other door, that is a convenience. Because sometimes those masjids, those masajid are big, very, very, very huge. If a person is not in a Muslim country, he might have masjids as big as a regular house, for example, or maybe bigger. But you go to some of those Muslim countries, you'll have masjid that's so big. So trying to walk all the way around the corner and then trying to stay on the sidewalk and then turn the corner is not as easy as walking through. It is unlawful for the woman who is menstruating or has postpartum bleeding to do any of the 6 aforementioned actions. Like in Mecca, yeah. MashaAllah. Yeah, some of those messages are very, very, very big in different countries. Very big, yeah. Like those messages are bigger than a mega church. Very big. So it is unlawful for the woman who is menstruating or has postpartum bleeding to do any of the 6 aforementioned actions. So what are those 6? Bismillah. They are praying and circling the Kaaba and touching the Quran, carrying the Quran, and reciting the Quran, and dwelling in a masjid. 6. Now the menstruating or postpartum bleeding woman has all of those 6. So the first 4 is for the one who doesn't have wudu. Then those 4 with the next 2 is for whoever's sexually impure. Then the woman who's menstruating or has postpartum bleeding has, as it says here, is prohibited from any of the 6 aforementioned actions and additionally 2 other actions. So that's going to total 8. The first is she may not fast before the bleeding ceases. And probably this needs here the word that. The first is that she may not, even in the Arabic it would say al-awwalu annaha, for example, that she. The first is that she may not fast before the bleeding ceases. However, it is permissible for her to fast after the bleeding ceases before performing a ghusl. She is obligated to make up fasting the days she missed from Ramadan. The days of Ramadan that she missed, she'll have to make them up. As opposed to the prayers, she doesn't have to make up the prayers that she missed because the prayers come more frequently. Except if a prayer came in and she had enough time to pray it before the menses started. and then the menses started before she prayed, and now she can't pray. This one, she'll have to make it up. And also, if the menses goes off before the sun goes down, she'll have to pray Dhuhr and Asr. Like at Asr time, then she'll have to pray Dhuhr and Asr. And if her menses goes off before dawn comes in at Isha time, she'll have to pray Maghrib and Isha. But anything else in between, she does not have to make it up because of the fasting, because of the menses. It says, however, it is permissible for her to fast after the bleeding ceases before performing Ghusl. Here, this G doesn't have to be a big one, and there's no need for these parentheses also. Just incorporate that into the text regularly. Maybe they meant to put the Arabic word here and didn't get put, and then that's why this is in parentheses. Secondly, she cannot allow her husband, or in the case of a slave woman, her owner, to enjoy the area which is between her navel and knees. I don't know why this is in parentheses here. We'll have to look at the Arabic text. Secondly, she cannot allow her husband, or in the case of a slave woman, her owner, to enjoy the area which is between her navel and knees. This word which, you don't need it. Which is, you don't need that part there. You could say, to enjoy the area between her navel and knees by lustfully looking at her. So according to the saying, he can't look there between her navel and her knees without a barrier while she's menstruating. Navel and knees doesn't mean only private part. It means, like we said, it means as stated. Between all what's between navel and knees, according to a saying, he's not allowed to look at that without a barrier when she's menstruating. And we say menstruating usually means also, or postpartum bleeding. They have the same judgment most of the time. So, she cannot allow her husband to enjoy the area between her navel and knees by lustfully looking at her. It says lustfully though, so I don't know if that's a condition. So we can ask about this word lustfully. Is that a qaid? Is that a restriction? If it's not lustful, then he can look? What I know is this saying that he can't look, I don't know it to be restricted to being a lustful look. Or maybe it says lustfully because we're talking about enjoying. Or to touch, or touching her without a barrier, i.e. skin to skin contacts. But that doesn't also require to be lustful. It's haram, according to this saying. Without a barrier. So with a barrier means what? Like she has izar, a waistcloth that covers from her navel to her knees. Or something like this. Or she has some pants, some sort of pants, for example. Or shorts. Covering from navel to knee. Before she makes the obligatory whole body wash. Ghusl, bath. Even after the cessation of bleeding. If her bleeding stops, he cannot enjoy any of that until she takes a ghusl. However, some scholars said that anything in reference to this issue, i.e. enjoyment of what is between the woman's navel and knees, other than sexual intercourse, is not prohibited. It's two sayings. So one saying that everything between navel and knees is prohibited. That's because of a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ was asked, what may I enjoy of my wife when she's menstruating? He said, alayhi salatu wasalam, whatever is beyond the izar. Ma fawqa al-izar. That means anything that's not covered by the waistcloth. And the waistcloth is to cover what's between navel and knee. So this would prove then that he cannot enjoy what's between the navel and the knee without a barrier. But there's another hadith that the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa ala alihi wasallam was asked. He was asked something and he responded and he said, Isna'u kulla shay'in illa nikah. Do everything but sexual intercourse, or do anything but sexual intercourse. So it appears that these two hadiths are in conflict with each other. So do these two hadiths actually contradict each other, or is there a way to put them together? So some of the scholars did not put them together. They did not put them together. Some of them they did, some of them they didn't. So by not putting them together, that means something needs to be taken and something needs to be rejected and then deemed outweighed and unusable. There's a defect somewhere because the Prophet doesn't contradict himself. Or there's an abrogation somewhere. Something was permissible and then it changed. I'm not saying here, I'm just talking in general. What I'm saying to you is, this is, according to some, a case of ta'arud. That means conflict. At-ta'arudu fil adillah. Conflict in the proofs. So when there's a conflict in the proofs, that means there's no way to put them together. Because if you can put them together, if you can merge them and come to a single meaning from both of them, then there's no real conflict. But if you cannot merge them and put them both together and come with a common meaning from the sum of them, then there is a conflict. So some scholars treated this as one of those cases. Due to the conflict in proofs, they came to two different answers, each party giving weight to one saying or the other. So those who gave weight to the first saying, they said you cannot enjoy anything between navel and knee without a barrier due to the hadith. And what supports this, that this is the preponderant way, is that this is more precautious. And precaution is one of the ways that they use, one of the things they resort to give preponderance. Precaution. And the others, they said it is permissible to do anything but sexual intercourse based on this proof. And what preponderates that is that this is the original case of the wife, that you are allowed to enjoy your wife. One is allowed to enjoy his wife. So then this would comply with that origin. But he has a limited restriction. So there's two sayings here, and Shaykh gave us both of them. And by the way, those who said the first saying, when they said on the side of precaution, they said that enjoying what's between the navel and the knees without a barrier while she's menstruating will pull, could pull him to have intercourse with her. So it's more precautious that he cannot do that so that he will not, so that his desire will not overtake him and then he would have intercourse with her while she's menstruating. And that finishes that section there. And if you don't mind, we can do a brief lesson today and we can stop there. If you have any questions that I can answer for you, then I'll be glad to. He said, just so I understand, is there a conflicting judgment in this case? Yes, there's two conflicting judgments, because one is saying you cannot enjoy what's between the navel and the knees without a barrier. And the other is saying you can enjoy what's between the navel and the knees without a barrier, but as long as there's no penetration. So that's conflict. That's two contrary sayings. The only thing they agreed about is that you cannot do penetration. Amin wa fikum. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.